Here we go. Whoops. Okay. Well, once again to the folks at home, I still can't find my tripod, so we're using a bucket of thumbtacks for tripods. Bless you.
That hurts your fingers.
Yes, but I impaled myself on, but that's okay. Couldn't go. Oh, there it is. Okay. Going to be a little interesting this week, partially because I'm running into the dilemma is I'm not quite sure exactly how to split things out, because all the next area I want to cover is very connected, and I could probably do 6 weeks, and you guys probably won't sit still for 6 weeks. So somehow I'm going to have to try to break out pieces of this for a little less than an hour worth of coverage. Just overview, what I was going to get into was start getting into, unfortunately David's not here because that seems to be his favorite topic, the different worldviews of creation and evolution, and we'll say science in general. So yeah, these are broken up really weird, so I'm going to kind of limit as far as how we break this into separate sections. First thing I do want to cover, I just want to lay some foundation. The world wants to split science and, we'll say, Christianity in the Bible into 2 separate camps. There's science over here. Ooh, nice penmanship. I hope I'm even spelling it right.
Yeah.
You got science over here, and then you got the Bible somewhere way over here. That scientists, that when you get into worldviews, that scientists, especially evolutionists, their opinion is that scientists is the biggest and most important, and as long as it's kept very, very, very far away from the Bible, everything's just going to be fine. Pardon? Oh.
That's funny.
Pardon?
That's funny because I was doing like this and just almost straight this.
Oh, you just made the line as a chain. Okay, cool. So the science is over here, and the secular worldview is science is the impartial knowledge of everything, and these crazy Christians over here they're just believing in fantasy and have no basis in reality. And as long as we Christians keep our Bible and spiritual lives over here and in church and keep quiet, then they'll tolerate us. Which actually gets to an interesting quote from Preacher Dawkins, but bless you, but I won't get to that now, or it's way too tangential. And the problem is, we as Christians have kind of bought it. And let me clarify one thing too. I'm not saying science is bad. I'm not saying all scientists are bad. What I'm talking about when I say science in this case is the differing worldviews of or the differing worldviews on origin. Unfortunately, the differing worldviews on origin, aka evolution, does generally encompass or saturate, well, almost all scientific fields, but almost all areas of the world, all areas of life. So when I say science in this case, I'm just talking about the evolutionistic worldview, not science in general. So if anybody wants to grow up to be a scientist, I'm not saying that's bad. In fact, that would probably be wonderful, getting some more biblical worldview. Can you put the chain down? You're like kind of making me crazy. Thank you. And I need to pick on surrogate Johnny, not on you. So you're doing really good though. Thanks. Thanks for holding up that end of the table. So again, I'm just overgeneralizing for the next however long when we talk about science. I'm not saying science is horrible and bad. And you should go home and burn your science books and be less homework, I guess. See if your teacher likes that.
I'd rather keep my science. I'd rather do science than
But what's happened is the world is saying science is so much more important, and the Bible is made up, so just ignore it. And there's just this major gap. Actually, I could probably represent the gap a little better here. Let's say science is this great tall thing that is supposedly the answers to everything, and then they tolerate us annoying biblical-based Christians over here because they have no other choice, I guess. Obviously, that is very wrong. Where the problem is, actually, let me break down two things. First of all, and again, as I was saying, not all science is bad. There are what's called two different types of science. There is, oh, I'm really spelling well today. There is observational science, see if I can spell science twice in a row, yay. And there is origin science. Yes, aka evolution, thank you. And here's then the problem, because when anybody, ironically, when anybody ever taught, whenever a Christian or creationist talks about science being bad, science being wrong, we're talking origin science. Unfortunately then, anytime a Christian talks about science, aka origin science, everybody assumes that we are talking about observational science and assumes that we're just absolute total morons because how can you argue and disprove origins, or disprove observational science? So that's something we need to make sure is very clear. Which type of science are we talking about? Talking observational, or are we talking origin? The interesting, and if you want to say slightly ironic part, which will really annoy people who lump themselves into the origin science categories, is really a lot, let's just say, probably all of the foundational science, or foundational observational science we know today was done by Christians. That it was, and really ironically, it's only the Christian worldview that can allow observational science to happen. I am not going to get way too much into this, but I'm just going to run a couple of things here. First of all, when you had pagan religions, the idea of the pagan religion was, this is how we think it is, don't ask questions, don't check things, because we don't want to anger the gods, because if we question the gods may doubt our sincerity, and then therefore we'll have famine or volcanoes or earthquakes or whatever. So the pagan worldview was, we're alive, let's just leave it alone. Because if we poke around too much, something may fall apart, or we may make something mad or something like that. Christianity, biblical, the Bible, God, even in the Bible, tells them to question things. I mean, we are not punished for having doubts. God has laid out the world and laid out the Bible and the plan of salvation, that it can withstand scrutiny, that we are able to go, we are able to look, we are able to learn, we are able to ask questions. And God created the earth that way too, and He created it all with logic. You get a lot of these pagan worldviews, their views on earth and creation and even physical reality. A lot of pagan religions say there is no physical reality, that we just all happen to be here as a collection of imaginations. We really don't actually exist. This doesn't hurt Caleb when I do it, it's just an imagination in his head, because we are not really here, we are all just manifestations of something. I'm sorry, I didn't turn you. Oh, okay, well here, let's try it now. But, so what happens is when you have that worldview, there's nothing to test, there's nothing to repeat, there's nothing to look at, because you're afraid if you think about it too hard, you may break it. Almost like, I don't know. Never mind, I'm not even gonna go there. But God laid out the earth and the world to be very, very logical, very testable, very repeatable. And a lot of the science, actually, let me just run through some of these, because needless to say, I did not remember all these. Let's see. Oh no, please tell me I did not print their most current one. Ew, this is going to be awkward really fast. Okay, well, we'll come back to that. Oh no, here we go. Okay, actually no. Real short, I'm going to rattle off some names of scientists. Unfortunately, my chart is too small. I couldn't go into a lot of detail, so some of these, I would say a lot of these you will have recognized. I can probably tell you some about some of the scientific principles they came up with, and if you don't know, then I can just make stuff up and you'll nod and smile. No, seriously. Here are some Christian worldviews made possible by observational science. You had Copernicus, you had Galileo, you had Newton, Faraday, Kelvin, Werner von Braun, Einstein. All of those people had a biblical worldview, and when they were looking at the things that they were looking at it from what the Bible said about the world, from what the predictability of the world. I can't get into a lot of those in specifics, and if we want to learn more, I can get more details. Like I said, I just made notes there. But I mean, you've got Copernicus, who's got pretty much how we perceive the Copernicus. Yeah, that's how we perceive the solar system. Before he worked that out, everybody in the world and everybody thought the Earth was the center of the universe and everything revolved around that. You've got obviously Newton with a lot of the laws of physics and stuff like that. Again, I am going to just stop talking before I embarrass myself about things that I can't remember. But a lot of that foundational science was people saying, the Bible talks about something about this, pulling things out of here. The Bible talks about that the earth is hung on nothing because it is out there hanging in the middle. It talks about the earth being a sphere. We didn't know that the earth was really a sphere until I don't know how long, and then that gets into ancient man. So never mind, I'm going off on a tangent yet again. But with that, what's happened is the biblical worldview has allowed sciences to flourish because our view of God, our view of the world does not discourage learning, does not discourage finding more out about the reality around us. So a lot of what is in observational scientists actually came from work that Christians have done. The problem then has become, as things go on, they tend to become more secular. So now, a lot of in observational science, especially now with the origin science piling on there, they now are basically claiming, well, Christians don't know anything because they think the earth is flat and they think all this. The irony is, all that pretty much came from Christians, we're just kind of forgetting it. What's happened then is the origin science, and I'm sorry, let me separate between the two. Observational science is basically, is what you should think of when you think of science. That I wonder why this happens, I'm going to test it and try to figure out why this happens. Now I know, now I can say here are rules for what happens. Observational science would be like gravity, would be the solar the planetary paths of the solar systems, would be pretty much every practical application of science. Electricity, magnetism, hydraulics, gravity, friction.
Chemical reactions?
Pardon?
Chemical reactions?
Chemical reactions, yes. All of that stuff is stuff that you can test. I can plug something into this electric outlet and I can plug it in 100 times and it's going to do the same thing, unless I blow the outlet, but that's another story. But it's going to be repeatable and I can use that to create, so I can plug something in, I can do it, I can take it out, put it back in. That's what really the simplest form of science was Thomas Edison and the light bulb. It took him how many thousands of tries to get the incandescent light bulb working. But that's what he was doing, taking things, putting between two wires, plugging them in, seeing how long they glowed until they burned, and he just had to do it thousands of times until he came across what I think was camel hair, I can't remember, something in a vacuum. That being in a vacuum helped the incandescent bulb last longer. But that, in the most simplest form, is science. You want to understand something, you want to make something better, so you keep trying until you have something repeatable that you can then say, okay, I tried all these things. If you don't believe me, you can go try all these things, or here's my results because I tried those things. And that's what happens a lot in, if you want to say in pure science, someone will say or do something, and then other people will go and take what they did and try it themselves. Make sure it's right, make sure there weren't any errors, maybe make it more accurate, maybe find out more things about it because now they at least know what they're looking for. Pretty much every technological advance that we deal with in this day and age can be attributed to observational science. I mean, I can go on and I will stop because then I can just go on. What happens is then we get, actually, let me write this down. The most important thing about observational science is it's repeatable. That if I tell you this is going to happen because this and this and this, and you can go and set up your own laboratory and do exactly what I said, and it will do the exact same thing as I told you if it's good science. Origin science, unfortunately, what happens there is that's people taking what they see around them and coming up with ideas how they got there. Origin science is not repeatable. The origin science talks about big bangs and evolution and planet and star formation and stuff like that. No one can go back to see the quote Big Bang. No one can go see the forming of the world. Everything as far as age of the earth, how things are built, all falls under origin science, and that's just basically people taking what it is they can see around them and coming up with an idea and saying this is what must have happened. Now, how do you want to say it? In all fairness, creationism, and I can really spell today, we'll call it creationism, falls under the origin science because it also is not repeatable. We can't say this is exactly how God created the earth. We can't go back and look. We don't know, except one thing that we have when you're dealing with origin science, you have to go to someone who's in authority who knows what actually happened. Problem is, in origin science, there is no one that was there at the beginning that can answer it. With creationism, there was one very reliable person that we can depend on their word, God, who was there when this happened. So he has shared with us in the Genesis account how things were created. Now, we can't, at this point, go and ask God how he did it. We can't go and find it. So there is going to be a degree, if you want to say a degree of faith there, but we are accepting the word of someone who said they were there. Or evolution, they are saying, we as fallible men think this is what happened, so we are now saying it has happened for sure. Which, ironically, evolution will often say Christians are cyclical because we are saying, well, God said it, so this is how we view the world. But all scientists are saying is, we said it, so you should believe it. So origin science both can be very cyclical. You just at that point need to decide what you're going to depend on and what you're going to believe on. Can you put that down, please? Thank you. So here's the thing. Because we even as Christians have been so indoctrinated that science knows all the answers and the Bible knows nothing, we unfortunately, collectively as Christians, have given up a lot of ground and willing to say, okay, well, science must know what they're talking about, so we're just going to go over here and hang out together and not talk about creation and other things like that because, well, they've proven evolution, so we don't know what they're talking about. There is no proof for evolution. When someone says that evolution has been proven, the closest definition of proven for evolution is that they have heard the lies of evolution repeated so much that they believe it is truth. That there is nothing that anybody can say that can actually prove evolution. You will get into some people talking about species changing, which we did touch on some last week with after the flood, and with the biblical kinds, you will see, there's the dog kind, which the dog kind then become wolves and dingoes and poodles and pit bulls and all that. They're still all dogs. Sometimes evolutionists try to say, well, because this wolf can relate and breed and stuff like that and become a poodle, that's proof of evolution. That is not proof of evolution. That is just showing that is just showing the variety that God has created in the different kinds. And that's something where you gotta really be careful, because a lot of times evolutionists will try to claim that speciesization as proof of evolution, and it's absolutely not. Another thing we need to be careful of, it's not as much anymore, but when evolution first started really becoming on the scenes, gosh, I can't remember what, early 1800s, I think. Yeah, like 1700s, early 1800s. It was, Christians were credited with saying that everything is the way it is now is the way it was when God created it. That's not true either. That's where you get into speciesization. There would have been one dog kind. When God first created dogs, there was two. There was a girl dog and a boy dog, and they had the genetic ability to have all the different kinds of dogs in the world, the poodles and the pit bulls and all that. So unfortunately, evolution was trying to claim that not everything was created the way it was, which really, whether Christians really were or not, that is not true, and Christians are not saying God created poodles at the beginning of the earth. That would just be sad, but another topic. So, what, and this is where I'm bopping all over on my notes, and I apologize. There's just so much here to cover. I gotta leave it back here. So, we've got our we've got our origin sciences. Yeah, here, let me rearrange this a little bit. We've got evolution, and then these are both what would be called, to the other opinion, origin sciences. What happens is we've all got the same things to look at. Now, kind of like stuff that we were talking about with the flood. If you remember my little mini flood chamber 2000, we were able to recreate some stuff. We were getting some layers and some stratification and stuff like that. What happens, and this is something that Answers in Genesis really talks about, really what boils down to the difference between creation and evolution is what our opinion and what our worldview is. Evolutionists claim there is no God, the Bible is not true, so we're going to figure out how the Grand Canyon happened, we're going to figure out how the world happened, we're going to figure out how dogs happen, trying to come up with a way to explain that without having God involved. We can be looking at the same exact things. We can be looking at dinosaur fossils, we can be looking at the Grand Canyon, we can be looking at stars. And because we are under the belief that God created the world, and as He described it, we're going to see things one way, evolutionists are going to see it the other way. And this is where it gets tricky, because then the evolutionists are like, well, we're scientists, so we're right. Origin science is not observational science. They cannot prove that they're right any more than if you want to say we can prove that we're right, but we at least have somebody we can fall back on, the Word of God. So it really all boils down to worldview and how you're going to look at it. And a really sad part is a lot of the evolution worldview is just things that people thought up and really have had no proof. I got to read again here because I can't remember all my notes here. And this one I really don't have. Oh, here we go. One of the big things that evolution needs to be able to say that it's going to work is a very long period of time, where we're talking about millions of years. I don't remember. The evolutionists say the universe is some number of billions of years old, and that would have probably been helpful to write down. But they're saying that the world is billions of years old. Biblically speaking, we're looking at something around 6,000 years old. So what happened is one of the first things that the origin science of evolution wanted to do was figure out how to have enough time that all of these things could have happened naturally and on their own. So basically, ironically, where the whole idea of millions of years came up is people just thought, we need millions of years for things to happen the way we want to happen, and they just started coming up with those ideas. Some of those started back, I found 3 different people, late 1700s, early 1800s, where basically they were like, yeah, we think the earth should be this year, this old, this old, this old. And it's basically they're throwing out numbers and saying, finally until they settled on a number of, I don't remember how many millions of years old, but basically they made up the number. And then the shame is now that made up number is now cast in stone, that we now know for sure, according to evolutionists, that the earth is that the universe is billions of years old and the earth is millions of years old. Just because that's what they thought. They have absolutely no proof, no way to prove that. And it just really kind of started as an idea, and everybody liked the idea, and they now say that is official and that is fact. Sad part is a lot of that is very cyclical in that they like to say, say for example, layers of the earth, where we talked about all the different layers of the earth were pretty much laid down either during the flood or right after the flood with the other cataclysmic events, the ice age, the glaciers, and other floods going on, laid down the layers of the earth. Evolutionists say, well, those layers had to be laid down individually. Should I have someone do this? So we'll just make these layers. Extend this way. So we as Christians see these same layers. Time for another marker. See these same layers, and we see, okay, here was the created layer that God created in the original earth. Then these are layers that lay down, say, flood. It's really hard to write sideways, so we'll just do F for flood. And then maybe this was post-flood, and this is post-flood. But these all happened, the flood layers happened in a matter of, sometimes, some of those layers could have actually gone down in minutes. I don't know, wow, that's great mention. I don't know if you guys remember, but talk, yes?
Did the fish and birds have it die?
Pardon?
Did the fish and birds die during the flood? Since birds can
I'm-
fly over the...
Well, the birds probably have to land somewhere.
Yeah, Noah took birds on the ark. Noah took birds and land animals. Fish he did not take, or well, not fish. Water animals he did not take on the ark. He didn't need to. There's a lot of water. That is actually some interesting stuff. One of the things that I always wondered about is we have fresh water and salt water, but apparently, obviously, saltwater and freshwater animals still existed. So I've read some stuff on that. I can't remember enough about that, but however, I think it's one of the two, they saltwater and freshwater don't actually mix, so there was still the ability for the freshwater and saltwater animals to be living. But so yeah, there would have been enough birds on the ark to be able to repopulate the earth, and the fish just had a heyday that the world just turned into one gigantic aquarium, and they're probably missing those days. But these layers in the flood all happened, talking about the Mount St. Helens eruption. There are canyons there that if you can look at those same canyons, equivalent canyons in the Grand Canyon, and evolutionist scientists will say those canyons took millions of years to form. We look at those exact same size canyons, same style canyons near Mount St. Helens, and we know because we were able to observe them, observational science, see that those were formed in a matter of hours. You get enough water moving around. It's amazing what water can do as far as restructuring and changing the shape of the earth. But so we look at this, what's happening in the flood. Some of this stuff could have happened in minutes. Some of this stuff could have happened in years. And when I say years, I'm going to say somewhere between 1 and 100 years. Evolutionists look at these same layers, and they want to subscribe millions of years to them, and I don't even remember all the names of the layers and stuff. But that's where you've all heard of the Precambrian layer, Mozart area. Oh yeah, that's good. I don't remember the layers. But where you'll hear a lot of the names of the different layers well, this layer is 10,000 years old, this layer is 1,000,000 years old, and all these layers laid in between. What happens is because they need the long periods of time to be able to make evolution fit, they then saw these layers and started saying, well, these layers are showing gradual buildup over time. Then this is where it gets really cyclical. If they find something buried down, here, my great fish fossil here. So you have the fish fossil there in that layer. Evolutionists will say, well, because it's in that layer, it has to be 1,000,000 years old. That's how they know it's 1,000,000 years old, because it's right down there. How they knew that was 1,000,000 years old is because somebody decided at some point that looks like that should probably be about 1,000,000 years old. And it gets very, very cyclical. And the problem is they have gotten it so ingrained in their minds that you get into evolution, they will not listen to anything. They will not listen to anything else, and they know that these are true, but they don't really know why these are true. And the only reason these are true is because guys like, gosh, I can't pronounce these, Pierre Laplace, Jean Lamarck, and Comte Buffon decided almost 200 years ago that this needs to be 1,000,000 years. That's it. Totally arbitrary. Now, to hear evolutionists talk today, a lot of science went into how they know for sure that this is 1,000,000 years old. They don't. They don't, but they truly and completely believe it with all their heart. So this is where it comes down to just flat out worldviews. Where is their starting point? Are they turning to man for what they know, or are they turning to God for what they know? The interesting part, though, is you look at the world around us, as you look at things, really things do fit the creation model much better. The millions of years that evolution requires for things to happen, things would just pretty much have decayed and fallen apart long before anything could really happen. Ironically, in observational science, they are saying, well, life can't come from no life, but then when you turn over to origin science, they have to have things coming from no life. So somewhere along the line, some electric storm supposedly happened and zapped a puddle of slime, and all of a sudden that slime was alive. And now, millions and billions of years later, that slime is now turned into humans and, well, everything else on the planet. And I am hopping all around here right again, I apologize. Here's where it gets really interesting is, as I said, unfortunately, with the evolutionary worldview, for, I'm going to say, probably almost 100 years, Christians have pretty much just walked away from it. Christians ended up believing, well, scientists say that we don't know what we're talking about, so we're going to come over here and we're going to talk about the Bible, and we're just going to ignore all this stuff. And really only in the last 40 years, I'm going to say, maybe a little longer, maybe 60 years, you really do have a resurgence in creation science, going out and looking at the facts, looking at things like the layers of the dirt and saying, okay, does this even make sense? The problem is, between that gap, we'll say from the 1800s to the 1950s, for that 150 years, Christians were basically, well, scientists must know what they're talking about, and that's where you start getting a lot of crazy theories where people try to make creation and evolution fit. And I am not going to get into that right now. What I do want to get into is, because of how much this millions of years is talked about in evolution, it has saturated everything to the point that we don't even a lot of times realize how much evolution and how much millions of years has saturated our culture. A lot of scientists do. We are spending millions and millions of dollars on a project called SETI, which is Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. They're spending ridiculous amounts of money looking for other civilizations out there, because their theory is, well, if life accidentally happened on Earth, it must have accidentally happened somewhere else. So we're just keep looking because we know because it accidentally happened here, it's got to accidentally happen somewhere else. A lot of the space probes and things, I mean, I think interplanetary exploration and space exploration is awesome. The thing is, as cool as it is, the secular evolutionary worldview is they're trying to search space because they are trying to find alien civilizations. That they truly in their hearts think, because of this worldview, that there has to be other civilizations out there. And I know that, I think, was touched on the one video I had him show you when I wasn't here. Which then gets in science, where science is spending ridiculous amounts of money on looking for other planets with water, planets that they call habitable. You'll see in the news, every time they find a planet that looks like it may possibly have water, it's now all of a sudden, yay, we finally proven that life can arise on other planets. No, they've just found what they may possibly think is another planet that may possibly have water on it. They find something that gives them some glimmer of hope, and they start pushing it like it's an absolute known fact, much like pushing it as an absolute known fact of the age of the Earth or how things were formed. The really sad part, entertainment is so completely saturated with millions of years in evolution. As much as I like science fiction and superheroes and comic books and stuff like that, that is tragically all an evolutionary worldview. You can't have alien lives and different species and stuff like that without the evolutionary worldview and without civilizations springing up from different star systems. Comic books and stuff. The whole concept of X-Men and things like that is, well, humans are, you remember my chart, humans are always getting better, so X-Men are mutants who are on the path to becoming better, more powerful, the next generation of humans. Again, as much as I love comic books, it's kind of sad because that's basically the premise that if some accident happens, you get bathed in nuclear radiation or bit by a radioactive spider or something with radiation or meteors or something like that, really cool things will happen to you. Tragically, in real life, you will die. Yes, you will die a most miserable death. So do not go out and try to be bit by a radioactive spider or hit by a meteor because it will be most unpleasant, I can assure you. So books, movies, comic books, even TV shows, and I mean the sad part is things that don't even have specifically to do with science. We'll talk about millions of years. I think the other video they talked about that even in like Bob the Builder and Dora and I don't remember what all they were talking about, just assumed the fact that the world has to be millions of years with no basis on it. But there's some famous quote, and I would have been smart to look it up, but basically it says, a lie told enough times becomes believed as the truth. And that's what's happened here with evolution, is they've said, we do not want to listen to what God said. The reason they don't want to listen to what God said is because then if they have to admit that God is real, then they have to listen to what the Bible says about sin and salvation and Christ's death, resurrection, and redemption. And the secular worldview wants to have nothing to do with it and claims we can explain the world through a completely natural process that they're then trying to figure out ways to be able to explain everything in the world and how the world works with no supernatural involvement without God. I should probably just stop because I'm like bopping all over the place. Okay, I know that was a bunch of random stuff I was throwing out at you guys. Any questions, any concerns, anything, or just everything I said made absolute perfect sense, and now you're going to go home and teach somebody else?
How did you learn this stuff?
I have been reading lots and lots and lots of stuff for a long time. I've started.
There's probably a lot of books and stuff.
Pardon?
There's probably a lot of books and stuff.
Yeah, and that's truly the hard part. And I, again, keep apologizing for apologizing, but there's a lot of stuff here, and it is completely. It is, as I told you earlier when we talked about the ark not being cute, you guys just really need to stop and think about things. And what happens is we are just so used to hearing what science and evolution says about the world, we don't even stop and think about what assumptions are being made by people around us and even by us. Back to the example of cavemen. I mean, no matter how hard you try, when you think of cavemen, you're going to think of people who are dumb and grunt and just think that fire is the coolest thing. They're not. They were people who happened to live in caves, and they were probably actually smarter than you and I probably put together at that point. But we have just become so indoctrinated. A lot of what we're dealing with is just really stopping to think. What does the Bible actually say? How big was the ark? What does the Bible say about the creation of the world? It's like we have just, because of what's happened over the course of the last 200 years, we have mentally been putting the ideas and thoughts that are in the Bible in a box and keeping them separate from the real world. And the Bible is completely 100% true when it comes to the real world. The Bible has helped develop observational science, has given the liberty for the observational science. God is a God of logic. The logic that He has created is what we're able to use for our logic. If the world happened accidentally the way evolutionists wanted to, you couldn't even depend on logic. There's nothing you can depend on. It ultimately all goes back to the Bible, but we have for 200 years, probably even longer, the world has been trying to tell us, and then a lie of Satan, the great deceiver. The Bible is not relevant today to day. You can believe the Bible what you want for your salvation and stuff like that, but leave the real world to these really smart scientists who know more than you. They really don't. They're just guessing. They've just been guessing longer, or been telling themselves these guesses long enough that they now believe it to be true. And there's a lot. There's a lot to cover. Some of this, I'm trying to give you guys an overview of what all. There's obviously no way I can teach you what's in all of these books here in the 13 weeks that we're going to be together. But I want to try to get you guys to just stop and think about it. Think about when you hear things, that people say things, when you're reading the Bible, when people are talking about the Bible, that there's just so much indoctrination going on that is anti-biblical. We need to stop, look at what the Bible tells us, look at the world through the Bible, through the lens of the Bible, because things that humans try to explain many times are completely contrary to the Bible. We can go back to the Bible. The Bible isn't going to tell us the answers about everything, but if we look at what God says about how the world was created, how the world was designed, how people were created, how people function, the nature of man, the nature of the world, the nature of God, there's a lot of things that we can figure out that the evolutionists can't figure out, because they're trying to come up with ways to say it. They're trying to come up with ways to explain it with totally avoiding God out of the picture. And at that point, I think I will just stop and try to figure out how to put the rest of these together in more bite-sized chunks. Another question?
No.
Okay. Just still up there? Okay. Bye, guys.
Well,